Hey guys, before we get started with today's show, I have some exciting news to share. Your financial pharmacist is now offering fee-only comprehensive financial planning services led by certified financial planner Tim Baker. We're dedicated to serving pharmacists like you who want something better than the status quo. We offer our clients an honest, education-focused approach that is specifically catered toward handling the high-income, student loan-laden, demanding career track of you, the pharmacists we serve. Our goal is simple: to get you from thinking, I don't know exactly what to do with my money, but I know I need to do something, to confidently saying, I know exactly what I need to do month in and month out to get out of debt, save for retirement, and achieve my financial goals. You can learn more by visiting yfpplanning.com. Again, that's yfpplanning.com.
It kind of gives us the freedom to do what we want both now and in the future. With saving for our retirement, but also we have smaller goals too.
You're listening to the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast, a show all about inspiring you, the pharmacy professional, on your path towards achieving financial freedom. Hi, I'm Tim Ulbrich, and on this week's episode, I welcome Amanda and Holden Graves to talk about their journey paying off $100,000 of student loans and other debt in just a few years. We talk about their strategies for aggressively repaying their debt, how they were able to effectively work together as a couple, and what lies ahead for them and their financial plan now that they are officially debt-free. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to make sure you're aware of our 2020 end-of-year checklist. With the end of the year approaching, now is the perfect time to dig into your financial plan and see what moves you should consider before it's too late. We have a new and free end-of-year financial checklist that walks you through issues surrounding assets and debt, tax planning, cash flow, insurance planning, estate planning, and more. You can snag this free checklist today and make sure your financial house is in order before the end of the year. Just visit yourfinancialpharmacist.com/2020 to download your checklist today. Again, that's yourfinancialpharmacist.com/2020. Amanda and Holden, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I recently ran across a blog post on the scope of practice titled How One Pharmacist Paid Off $100,000 of Student Loans and Other Debt in Just a Few Years. And after reading that article, I was inspired by your story and wanted to bring on not only Holden to share about his journey in pharmacy school, pharmacy practice, debt accrual, as we'll talk about here in a little bit, but also bring Amanda on the show, as we know that this ultimately, for the two of them, was obviously a joint decision on how they were going to approach this debt and how they were going to approach the rest of their financial plan. So I really appreciate you guys coming on to share the story. Now, before we jump into the specifics of your debt-free journey, how you did it, how much you had, what was the secret to success, what does this mean for you guys going forward, I'd like to start by hearing a little bit about your backgrounds and the work that you're doing today. So Holden, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your pharmacy career background, how you got in a pharmacy career, what was the interest, where you went to school, and the work that you're doing right now.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Yeah, so originally I'm from Northwest Arkansas, so near where the University of Arkansas is. Mm-hmm. So what really got me interested was actually in high school. One of my favorite teachers actually read an article to us about pharmacists and kind of the need for pharmacists as the population continues to age. So that was kind of what sparked the interest in me. And I went and shadowed. My uncle actually owns his own pharmacy. So I went and shadowed with him and just loved the rapport that he had built with his patients. They all came to him and had questions for him and trusted them just as much as their physicians. And so I just loved that rapport that he built. So that's what got me interested. I went to the University of Arkansas for my undergraduate, where I met my lovely wife, and then went to the University of Arkansas for medical sciences for pharmacy school. Mm-hmm. So I did my 4 years there, and in the middle of pharmacy school, I got married to my wife. Mm-hmm. So that was just an amazing experience from that point of view. After school, I actually applied for residency, but I didn't match with anywhere. So that was kind of interesting, kind of left me scrambling. Luckily, I was able to find a job at a children's hospital in Dallas, where I started and worked there for 3 years. And then now currently at a behavioral health hospital. It's still in the Dallas area.
Very cool. And, I hope your story there, Holden, for our listeners, if we have students that are listening, especially those that are in their fourth professional year, getting ready, end of 2020, submitting applications, getting ready for residency interviews, thinking about the matches, it's overwhelming, right? And I think that, just hearing your story about, the match was not successful, maybe by what you had determined success would look like in that time, but I'm guessing through persistence and other opportunities and doors that opened up, you found yourself in a niche working in behavioral health. Real quick on that, like from the experience of not doing residency, how were you able to find yourself in a position like this? And ultimately, what was successful for you to be able to land a position that others may hear and say that that's a job that typically does require residency?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no small amount of luck that happened. I got into the children's hospital. It was kind of an entry-level pharmacist position, so I was mostly in the operations side. So that part, he basically was only looking for new grads. So that worked out that I was able to get in from that avenue. And after that, I just kind of worked my way into the good graces to where I became the pharmacist in charge of one of the smaller pediatric hospitals. And so that kind of positioned me well as just having that experience of going through and dealing with the nursing leadership and the physician leadership that then ultimately allowed me to transition into the behavioral health side as well, where I'm also serving as a pharmacist in charge. So
that's great. Congratulations. I think paving that pathway is something we need to hear more of those stories, because I think we sometimes fall into the trap that, if I don't do A or B or C, it doesn't mean I'm going to have these other opportunities. And there's certainly many other stories out there, such as yours. So Amanda, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Most definitely. So my background is actually in food science, which is awesome. So I went to the University of Arkansas, where I met my husband, and so graduated from there. And I immediately got into the food industry. And so my background's a little bit diverse between quality assurance, but majority of my career has been in research and development. And then I also dabbled in sales in the food industry for a while, kind of on a technical sales side. But currently I work in the culinary department for a restaurant company. So I get to manage kind of the food and culinary side from a science perspective, which is really great for me to be able to combine. I love food and I love to eat. So I get to combine the culinary arts with the food science side and just make things come to life on a mass scale.
What a unique career path. When I read some of your background of combining science and cooking, I was like, heck yeah. I mean, that's awesome. I think one of the reasons I enjoy cooking so much is just, that bringing in some of the science and understanding it. It reminds me of some of, the pharmacy training. I think there is so much both art and science in cooking. So how did you find yourself in that career path and even having an interest in that area?
It really worked out well. So my high school had a culinary arts magnet program.
Oh, cool.
So I did culinary training for the first 3 years of high school. And then senior year, I was an intern in a hotel kitchen, which was an absolutely incredible experience. But with that, I also learned I didn't want to be a chef. And just through seeing that, I was like, but I still love food. And also in my high school, I was in the science magnet program. And I took chemistry for 2 years because I just love chemistry. And so just kind of thinking about how I can combine my love of science and food, I just kind of stumbled upon food science, and it really just is the perfect combination.
I love it. And before we go on to talk more about your financial journey and your story, which I'm confident is going to motivate, inspire other pharmacy professionals and others listening on their own journey and their own debt payoff, what they're working through as well, I have to know, I don't hear the thick Arkansas accent that I have heard from other guests on this show that have graduated from UAMS or Harding. What's the deal? Are there like levels of Arkansas accent?
Yeah, there's up in the northwest corner of the state where the University of Arkansas is, we kind of more have the less southern. And then as you get closer into Little Rock and the southern part of the states, it gets a lot thicker. Amanda's also actually from Dallas too, so she doesn't have that for that reason.
Okay, that explains
So I definitely don't have a southern accent. And on Holden, it only comes out on certain words occasionally, but otherwise not too much.
Yeah, I'm thinking of other guests we've had on the show that are doing some awesome things, debt repayment, real estate investing, others in the Arkansas area. And it was definitely a thicker accent. So
yeah, that's more the southern part of the state for sure.
Absolutely. Well, let's jump in, paying off $100,000 student loans and other debt in just a few years. And so we're going to talk about how you did that, how you accrued it, how you paid it off, why you did it, what was the strategy. So Holden, kick us off here. Was this a majority or all of your student loan debt? Tell us about the amount and also the position and how you got into that debt.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess it depends on who you're talking to on whose debt it is. So according to me, it's all of my student loan debt. According to my lovely wife, it's all of our student loan debt. So it was mainly my schooling that accounted for all of that. So as far as the actual student loan debt goes, we're about $80,000 in student loan debt. But in the middle of pharmacy school and then right after pharmacy school, we actually purchased 2 new cars. And so at the lowest point, we had about $100,000 in total debt.
Okay. So about 80,000 in student loans, about 20,000, 2 cars. That brings us together to that 100,000. Now, I'm sure many of our listeners hear 80,000 and say, I wish I only had $80,000 of student loan debt, which, it's unfortunate that I even have to say that out loud, but that's the reality, right? So we have class of 2020. We now have the median student loan debt that is north of $175,000. I've often worked with pharmacists that exceed that, or perhaps even, couples that have more on top of that. So 80,000, I don't want to mitigate what you guys have done. I mean, it's incredible. But my question there is, what was the strategy? How were you able to keep the debt load, I guess, quote, low of 80,000 compared to what we see out there is the normal?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we were I was very intentional early on whenever we were accumulating the debt. So luckily, we were both able to graduate undergrad with no debt. So it was just pharmacy school that I needed to finance my way through. But I just still wanted to take out the minimum that I possibly could. So I really only took out enough loans just to cover tuition. I never took out anything extra to cover expenses or rent or anything. I had a little bit saved up because I actually worked in a pharmacy in undergrad and saved up some money there. And then while I was in pharmacy school, I did still work as well. So that was basically able to cover my rent and food payments were basically coming from what I was able to work. So that's kind of the way we did that. And then just going to our in-state school, University of Arkansas, is one of the lower cost programs. So just trying to stay as low cost as we possibly could with that was a big key.
Yeah, multi-prong approach. I think that's a good strategy. A little bit of strategy in where you go to school, in-state tuition, as well as being able to work and some other things that can help reduce. And is that our listeners know very well, whether in the debt accrual or debt pay down phase, anything you can do to reduce that indebtedness while you're in school is going to pay dividends, obviously, in what you don't have to pay back into the future. So in the article that you wrote and I referenced earlier in the show, you mentioned that while you were still in pharmacy school and before you were married, you had discussions about money, which I think, and I've talked about on the show before, is so important for every couple to be doing as early as you can, having some of these big discussions around money. Here, we're obviously talking about debt, but of course, it's much bigger than that. So Amanda, tell our listeners about those conversations, how they went, how you felt about the debt, even though it wasn't your own debt, but was going to become your collective debt, how those conversations went and what you ultimately discovered about each other through those conversations.
Yeah, most definitely. So we both knew that a great foundation in marriage is communication. And we also knew that, financial stress can be one of the major stressors in a marital relationship. So we wanted to start those conversations really early on just to make sure we were on the same page and kind of had a strategy. And then from my personal perspective of coming in, I was all in. I was very supportive of Holden and going to pharmacy school. And, that included the student loan debt that came along with it. So as Holden mentioned earlier, I very much saw it as our debt, not just his debt. And so together we needed to kind of make that plan to address it. But like you mentioned, a lot of those early conversations, we got to learn a lot about each other and just how we viewed money and kind of those different backgrounds that we had from a financial perspective and kind of blend those together to make a plan. So we had that even before we were married, which helped just to kind of continue to address that as we were kind of going through the process.
That's great. I think the conversations are important. As awkward as they may be at first, or however you break the ice, I think the outcome is incredibly valuable, not only on the debt repayment part, but of course, as you guys know, from living this, this is just one part of the financial plan. And so having open communication here, hopefully will translate to other areas as well. Holden, for our listeners that perhaps find themselves in a situation where they're carrying a big debt load, maybe in a serious relationship, haven't yet had that conversation, maybe they're feeling a little bit of guilt about, hey, I'm bringing this debt into the relationship. I'm not sure how someone's going to perceive this. Any words of wisdom or advice that you would give them here and how you were able to approach this subject, or was it just a natural conversation that really came to be between you and Amanda?
Yeah, I think the just the foundation of our relationship and just the trust that we were able to give to each other, that she was open to, hearing exactly what it was. And the main thing is that I didn't want this to be like me versus her or anything like that. Like I wanted us to come together to try and tackle the debt together and try and do everything. So I didn't want to take her feelings out of the situation, and I wanted to take her advice as well because she's much smarter than I am. So I definitely I wanted to bring us both on the same page, because it's a lot easier if we're both know what we're heading towards, as opposed to two people at odds with each other. So
absolutely. And that is a good segue into one of the questions I like to ask individuals, such as for you guys that are going through this journey together and have chosen an aggressive debt payoff strategy, is what's the purpose? What's the reason? What's the why behind this aggressive debt repayment? And we'll talk in a moment about exactly how you did it. But I think that question is one that I talk often on the show about. It's so important to answer that. And I don't necessarily believe there's one right answer, but we know there's options, right? So you guys could have taken out this $80,000 in student loan debt. You could have taken out 20 plus years, or you could have aggressively paid it off like you did, whether that's in the federal system or with the private lender. So tell our listeners, and Amanda, I want to start with you, and Holden, feel free to add on from there. Tell our listeners about what was the purpose, what was the why behind this aggressive debt repayment strategy?
So for me personally, and my answer might vary a little from Holden's, but for me, the why was just the stress of just having that debt kind of hanging over us. I am personally very risk averse, and I just try and avoid anything that would either be risky or cause me more stress. Really, it was just the fear of it just kind of looming over everywhere. And I just wanted it to be gone. I just wanted it to be completely gone as fast as possible. And I was ready to do kind of whatever we needed to do to get there, to kind of move on to what life would look like after the debt was paid off, and just be able to have not that standing payment of the loan every month, but being able to kind of free that up to have a little more flexibility in the future.
Holden, what about you?
Yeah, mine was kind of along the same viewpoints of, it's just the stress of it hanging over you, less so of the stress that it was hanging over me and more so of what it was hanging over Amanda. So I just could see the way that she just kind of just did not like the stress. And I just knew that that's just something we needed to get out of our lives as soon as possible. I was kind of more on the train of, kind of doing the 5 or 10 year repayment and just kind of letting it drag out and being invested. So kind of my viewpoint was, let's work on getting our invested assets up as high as we can, as early as we can. So that's kind of where the compromise came in. If it was up to Amanda, we probably would have had it paid off in that first year. So we kind of settled this somewhere in between, so that way we could make sure we were maxing out some of our investment accounts and going about it that way as well.
Yeah, and I think compromise is such an important summary of what you just said. I think some of our listeners may hear $80,000 and their natural, tendency may be, hey, I'm going to take that out, low interest rate as much as I can, take it out long. Again, that's not a wrong answer depending on somebody's interests and how they feel about the debt. And I always say it's the numbers plus the emotions. And both of those are really important, right? So I like what you said, Holden. You may have leaned toward one strategy, but when it's causing, stress or anxiety, I think this is an area, and I say this with an emergency fund as well, there's places to defer. And there's places where you maybe push someone to come more to the middle, or maybe an area that they're not as comfortable with. And I think this is one when you're talking about, the stress, or when you're talking about some of those other emotions that can come with this debt load, probably not the area to be pushing somebody, even if mathematically you could make an argument that, hey, if I put more in investing, it may mean more in the end. So kudos to you guys for working through that.
Yeah, and don't think I didn't also try that approach too, but it did not did not completely get rid of the stress from her point of view. So
I can see the conversation of like, hey, here's the compound interest calculator, and look at the numbers, and what if we did this, and what if we did that?
That's exactly what I tried to do.
Yes, we did go over that.
So I want to build on something, Holden, that you said. I heard you say investing was a priority. Many of our listeners are often trying to balance, student loans, investing, emergency funds, paying off car debt, such as what you mentioned, saving for a home, starting a young family, making sure they have the right insurance policies in place. The list goes on and on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can be very overwhelming for folks. And there's kind of different strategies. If sometimes you balance a lot of these, sometimes you focus in on one, depending on the goal, depending on the timeline, again, depending on the math, how somebody feels. So talk us through your strategy in terms of how you approached the debt alongside of investing, alongside of emergency funds. And I know you guys currently have a home, so also being able to save up for the down payment on a home. How did you bring those issues to the table and then determine how you're going to allocate funds and in what priority?
Yeah, so basically we just kind of came and sat down to be able to discuss what our goals are. We actually do a monthly check-in meeting, just a financial checkup every month. So that way we can make sure we can see we track all of our spending. So we see what we spent on, how much we've got left over for the month, and if there's anything we need to adjust for the next month or the next year, and then just also be able to talk about our goals and what goals we have. So it's kind of just that approach of just getting to the table and seeing everything. So of course, mostly from Amanda's side was, okay, we need to pay off the car loan. We need to pay off the student loans. And she was also a little bit like a down payment for a house, because also wanted to move into a house, and then big into the emergency fund as well. So that was kind of the other part. And so then, of course, I agreed with all of that. Also saving just as much as we could in our retirement account. So we started off just a little bit over the match, and then just kind of slowly ramped up over a year or two to be able to max out our 401ks.
And I'm guessing our listeners may be thinking what I'm thinking, which is, you're making it sound very easy. But when you look at that number, I mean, $80,000 or $100,000 in sum over 3 years, people can do the math. $100,000, 36 months. Those are big monthly payments, and so it wasn't just the student loan debt or the car debt. It was also the down payment that you're saving for a home. It was also investing for retirement. All of those things need cash, right? And at some point, you got to figure out, hey, how are we going to live off of less than we make so we can free up cash to be able to achieve those goals? So tell us more, Amanda, like what was the strategy or what was the success, the secret sauce, whatever you want to call it, for you guys in terms of being able to keep expenses down so you could ultimately free up cash and put that cash towards the goals? What were some of the sacrifices or cuts that you guys had to make?
One thing I think that we learned, and I think Holden mentioned it earlier, that we got married in the middle of pharmacy school. So for those first 2 years of marriage, Holden was in school and I was working. So we kind of had figured out how to live off of one salary. And then even though we were super excited, come graduation and Holden getting a job, we really tried to live within the same means that we had been for those previous 2 years. And then just kind of freeing up the new paycheck that we were getting to go towards all those different things of, meeting our financial goals. So I think that was the big thing, was still living off the same budget and then just freeing up the rest to meet our financial goals.
And how did automation, Holden, if at all, play a role here? We talk a lot about on the show, once you got a plan, really the one of the best things we can do is get out of our own way to make sure the plan actually happens. And automation is often the vehicle, the system that will allow that to happen. Did you implement kind of automatic withdrawals towards these payments, or how did you make sure your goals were being achieved while you had other competing priorities for your expenses?
So, of course, I went to the University of Arkansas. So Joe Baker was there, and he was
shout out to Joe.
He was my professor. Yeah, I know. I still need to get his book, so don't tell him I haven't gotten it yet. He really kind of set us up, so that was a really good foundation. And then at the time, he was recommending Automatic Millionaire. So it was before y'all had come out with your book.
Yeah.
And so that was a big one that I just read that and just loved this of, these people that just kind of never really made that much and they just saved automatically and paid off stuff. And all of a sudden they were, had 3 homes and like $1 million in the bank just because they were automating everything and not thinking about it. So that was the big thing for us. So everything we had was automated. We had our 401ks automated. We had basically everything coming out of my paycheck. So my paycheck would get deposited every other Thursday.
Yeah.
And Friday, we had all of the automatic drafts going towards our different savings accounts and also towards our loan accounts as well.
Awesome. And we'll link in the show notes to Automatic Millionaire by David Bach. We've talked about that in the show before. Also to Joe Baker himself, Baker's Dirty Dozen, Principles for Financial Independence. Excited about that new resource coming out. And I also would add to our listeners that want to learn more about this concept of automation, One of my favorite books, you've probably heard me talk about it before, I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, does an awesome job of actually getting in the weeds on kind of what could this look like from a system standpoint and how can you implement it. And I think for many people, the idea of it seems more complicated than the actual implementation process. So I'd recommend those resources. Before I ask you guys about, hey, what's ahead now that we've got this debt paid off, we're in the home, I wanted to, Holden, for a moment, go back to the student loans. I didn't ask you what the strategy was there. Was it stay in the federal system, pay them off? Was it refinance the loans? And any advice you would have for our listeners are trying to make that distinction or that decision?
Yeah, absolutely. So we went with the route of refinancing. So I never really thought about getting it to like filing our taxes separately or going into the weeds on that. I just looked at what our tax return was and tried to plug that into the repay and pay options and just realized that we'd actually be paying more towards the debt doing that than just the standard 10-year payments. So that was never really an option, was doing that. And then I didn't really want to be tied down with one particular company or one particular field. So I didn't want to be in the public service field. If, 5 years in, I realized, well, I don't really like this. I didn't want to be stuck in that type of situation. So since we were going to be so aggressive with it, we decided to refinance and got a much lower rate on the refinance. And so just kind of went at it that way and paid it off just as much as we could, as quickly as we could.
That makes sense. And so, as we now look at the future and what's ahead, we've got an emergency fund in place. We've got student loans paid off. Check. We've got the cars paid off. Check. Obviously, you're in the home, so the down payment happened. Check. And you were investing for retirement along the way. So I'd like to hear from both of you, both some of the numeric goals of what's ahead. Where do you guys want to focus on in terms of, the X's and O's in your financial plan? And then perhaps some more of the softer sides of the financial plan. What are you hoping this means for your family going forward? So Amanda, you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So now that we're kind of moving forward, as we've checked all those boxes, I'll let Holden speak to more of the financial strategy because he's better with that. But
he's the nerd, right? Let's be honest.
That's it.
Oh, he totally is. He totally geeks out on finances, which I love. And he does really great at kind of the future planning, where I'm more of the close in monitoring the monthly budget. So I'm kind of the monthly person, whereas he kind of does everything else. But it's just been really great to kind of be a partner in seeing those different strategies kind of come to life. And what that means too is it kind of gives us the freedom to do what we want both now and in the future, with saving for our retirement, but also we have smaller goals too of, we have automatic savings for vacation. So if we decide we want to take a family vacation, it won't be a big financial stress because we created that savings just so that way we can do little trips or activities and different things like that.
And Holden, give us the, what's the next 3 to 5 years look like? What's success look like for you guys going forward now that you're past this $100,000 of debt?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we're just kind of focused right now on just kind of accumulating as much as we can. It's just kind of, we don't have like specific 3 to 5 year goals. We usually go like 1 year at a time, but for the most part, it's just, 3 to 5 years, we're still going to get, 3 to 5 years of invested assets to be able to, cover us for if anything were to happen, or if anything, if one of us needed to take a break or walk away from a job that's stressful. So that's kind of the biggest things there. One thing Amanda didn't mention though was actually when we paid off our student loans. We actually paid off our student loans in October of 2019, and our son was born at the end of November. So about a month difference. So it actually it worked out perfectly because it was just amazing because we really didn't feel any richer after we paid off the loans because immediately Amanda went on maternity leave. But it really gave her the freedom to take the full 12 weeks off and make sure that she could go back. And now especially she can decide later on whether she wants to take a smaller role with what she's doing or just step away altogether. It just kind of gives us the freedom to have those options. So we're just trying to build up that so that it takes a little bit of the stress off Amanda too. So she's less worried about if she wants to step away or just slow down a little bit with work.
Freedom and options. Couldn't have said it better. I think, for you guys, this certainly is the case. You're moving into what I would say is the offensive part of the financial plan and really being able to, build some of the wealth into the future, obviously achieve other goals that you want to achieve and have the freedom and option if for whatever reason you didn't want to work or work part-time or, to be able to replace some what would come from a traditional W-2 income. So congratulations on the progress of what you guys have made. I'm excited for what lies ahead for you guys as well. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on the show to share your journey.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Tim. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.